we're just like throwing chefs under the bus right now of like they did this and they did this and they did. It's like yeah, like I did all those things too. Like it's a cultural problem. It's not an individual problem. And I have a bit of an issue with media and people kind of like witch hunting these chefs and like make and putting it all on like one chef. And my heart goes out to them. It's like man, it's not like their problem. It's a fucking cultural industry problem.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Burnt Chef Journal, hosted by myself, Chris Hall, the founder of the Burnt Chef Project. I'm very excited about this week's guest. His name is Trevor Bird. He joins me from Canada. He was a two-time finalist on Top Chef Canada and Top Chef Canada All-Stars. He's owned multiple businesses and was bred in the Ramsay-esque era and has made many mistakes by being attached to his own identity and his own sense of purpose, which ultimately has impacted other people. And by his own admittance, this is something that he feels very strongly about now and making a change. He joins us to talk about his experiences running businesses, doing things perhaps not the right way. Also, he talks about now his journey in terms of being able to make a difference to people's lives and how he is on a path to be able to create a healthier mental space for many people, and also the importance of things like breath work within day-to-day life as well. So it's a great conversation, slightly different format to usual, and I really hope that you enjoy this week's chat.
On the surface, we at Lamb Weston are a leading global frozen potato product provider, but hospitality is in our roots. We are helping to chip away the stigma of mental health in the industry and truly believe in well-being through potatoes, which is why we are in full support of the Burnt Chef Project. If you want to find out more about how we provide well-being through the humble potato, or try a free sample of our award-winning products, such as our proper British chips, the Dukes, follow us on Instagram at Lamb Weston UK.
Yeah, like I think it's challenging for chefs to really drive the change because they're so busy, right? Like there's so much shit in their own world. It's like they're like the ground floor change makers, and it's like they need to take care of their culture. But for somebody to actually work on it, on like don't work in your business, but work on it, and like work on the change, don't work in the change. Like the chefs are working in the change, but it's important to have voices that work on the change. So I just want to like acknowledge you for working on it, and I think it's a much needed voice for the industry. So yeah.
Thank you. That's appreciated. And it's amazing to hear that it's, even in two years sort of fairly hefty focus, it's been going for 3 years, but in that period of time, it's managed to reach virtually, it has reached every continent around the world. And for me, it's intriguing to see that actually this has gained gravity so rapidly. It means it must have been needed, but my only regret is it wasn't done sooner. I just don't understand. But I guess going to what you were saying, it's when you're in the thick of it and when the shit's hitting the fan every day, it's very difficult to find the energy and to find the acumen to be able to implement sustainable change.
Yeah, and it's definitely important to kind of take a step back because when you're so in the restaurant and so in your business, it's like to take the step back and kind of get a bird's eye view of what's going on is extremely challenging.
Well, listen, the floor is entirely yours. I mean, no matter what tangent or twist or turn it takes this.
Yeah, so my name is Trevor Bird. I'm in Vancouver, BC. I would say I guess I was a Canadian chef who very recently retired from the industry within like the past week in 2021, 3/4 of the way through. And I've been cooking for 24 years. It's the only career I've ever had and ever done. And, it really provided an amazing life. I mean, I've cooked all over the world. I've been guest chefs in like 3 Michelin star restaurants in Hong Kong. I've done everything that I've wanted that you could possibly want to do as a chef. I mean, I've been to Singapore, Australia, Thailand, San Francisco, and I've done everything. I've won all the accolades. I've won Best Chef in Vancouver. I've had award-winning restaurants, and yeah, it's just time for a change. After 24 years of the grind and the hustle, it's a lot. And now I have a beautiful wife, and I couldn't have met her without the restaurant that I had. And I have two beautiful boys, and just the challenges that the industry is facing right now. I'm just gonna say it's a young man's game, and I just can't take it on. Like I look at these challenges and I'm like, Jesus Christ, my family needs me. Like I need to refocus where I'm going, and what matters to me most, and that it is my two boys and my wife. And as we all know, the industry can be crippling at points, especially when you have a young family. So with everything going on, the state of coronavirus and everything, I just decided to completely change directions. And I've been training and taking courses, and I'm in school right now for a therapy modality called internal family systems. And I started doing therapy maybe 10 years ago, very, very loosely, just because I'm like, I'm not that happy. I don't understand why. And then it started to really like make some big changes. And then like my wife at one point was like, you need to fucking start saving because divorce is expensive and so is therapy. So choose one. And I was like, shit. So I really got involved in like doing deep dives into myself like 5 years ago, and I started to take it pretty seriously. And I in the kitchen, like I was the Gordon Ramsay of my kitchens. Like I was highly emotional, take things like I'd talk to my cooks really inappropriately, make really inappropriate jokes. Like I don't know how it is out in Europe, but right now we have like this trend in North America and Canada where we're just like throwing chefs under the bus right now of like, they did this and they did this and they did. It's like, yeah, like I did all those things too. Like it's a cultural problem. It's not an individual problem. And I have a bit of an issue with media and people kind of like witch hunting these chefs and like putting it all on like one chef. And my heart goes out to them. It's like, man, it's not like their problem. It's a fucking cultural industry problem. It's like, I love this question that's put out by like behavioralist B.F. Skinner, and some people can take this a bit strangely, but like, are we truly responsible for our behavior? And what that means is like, how much does our environment shape our behavior? And in kitchens, I mean, like, especially a decade ago, I'm not having mindful conversations with my chef. I'm being called a cunt and work harder and faster. And the harder I work, the more that he likes me, the more that I feel safe in his presence. So it's this kind of like double-edged sword where you're like pushing so hard and you can't stop, because if you do, you get berated and it's like, oh, well, this is how it works. And nobody tells you any different. Nobody says, hey man, that's not cool. Don't do that. So with conversations like this and what you're putting across, all the continents and within industry is like, hey, like, you're teaching chefs how to have boundaries, which is amazing, because restaurants know no boundaries. Restaurants are like an abusive caregiver. They just take, and it's up to us to be like, no, like that's not okay. And it's like, do you want to put yourself into a culture where that is okay, which still exists today, and that's okay as well, but it's just to bring awareness to like that culture of what do you expect from your people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
All the way. And there's going to be two parties. I can picture it in my head now. There's going to be two listeners of this who going back to your original question, if you didn't have those initial thoughts, then the behaviors wouldn't exist. And those who go, actually, you are a product of your environment, like I spoke about on a recent episode, the Stanford experiment. If you've seen that, and again, I don't think you can ever be completely absolved and say it's a whole 100% of one or 100% of another. I think that certain people will have the characteristics in those environments that will bring out the worst in people. And human beings are nasty, horrible beings. Like, we're designed to fight for survival, and we do so at not just our own personal cost, but for other people's cost as well. And it's not until you're in these very stressful, toxic environments that someone who you thought was usually quite passive and non-aggressive and, not in any way brutal, can turn into an absolute cock. And it's refreshing to hear that. And again, there's going to be these parties where, because again, I don't agree with witch hunting, right? It's the same thing that I say to everyone, and this is going to upset people, and I'm probably going to get a load of shit from it on social media. And do you know what? Thick skin now, but I'm not absolving anything that anyone has done in the past to affect or inflict any damage. That's not the done thing, and it's not forgivable. But neither is trying to set fire to the individuals who did something once upon a time in their life and have tried to make now penance for it. You're never going to be able to undo that child that you bullied at school, or to that, to that old lady you didn't help cross the road, or to that individual that you've destroyed their marriage. You're never going to be able to undo that. But as an individual, if you understand that that's incorrect and that you're actually trying to make a change and that you're trying to readdress that balance for the rest of your life, if it takes, then I don't believe that those who once were should be now classified as those who are now. And I think there's a very big distinction in that, which is often getting quite muddied in these conversations.
Absolutely, man. And like, just riffing off of that, it's like, just because we have done bad things in the past doesn't make us bad people today. Like, we're not, the chef that, like, I have been a bad person. I've done some fucked up things in the kitchen for sure. But that doesn't define who I am, and I would be willing to have a conversation with anybody from the past to be like, hey, like, I was a hurting person back then, and like, hurt people, and that's not who I am today. But I mean, it's hard because when you meet like a polarized outlook on things, because people are going to look at these chefs and be like, I can't believe he did that. He's an asshole. He's this, he's that. That's not going to create space for healing. That's not going to create space for the other person to admit their behaviors. That's going to create a defensive response or shutdown. I always say, like, picture you're talking to someone else, like you're talking to children. And if you're starting to like shame and blame and tell these people they're bad and you fucked up and you're like, you did all these things, like, what do you think is going to happen to a child when you tell them all these things? Like, they're going to get small. They're going to be like, they'll be stop, stay away. They're going to get aggressive. They're going to get defensive. So, I don't know if the world's ready to I'd say majority of the world, and especially, like, not to throw the industry under the bus, but it's like, a lot of people in our industry aren't ready to hear that, where it's like, don't be so polarized. Like, just like see what it is, and then how can you engage with that? Like, what are your yeses and nos within that certain situation? Where can you say, no, that's not okay, but in a respectful, loving way? Where can you say, no, things need to change? I'm not here to blame you or shame you or make you wrong, but it's like, I would encourage, if you're in an environment that doesn't provide a safe space or doesn't lend to this healthy conversation, just because you disagree with something somebody did, you don't, like, cancel culture comes in and just tells you to, like, completely X them out, when it's like, we're lacking the ability these days to hold space for two truths. We're lacking the ability to see the deeper side. It's like, we see something, we don't like it, like, no, just not even engage with it. And then we create this, like, very polarized belief where I'm right, the other side is wrong. And it's like there's a lack of compassion, a lack of conversation that can really be born from that. So these chefs that might have been crazy in the past, but and also media, like, glorifies it, right? So it's like, it makes us think we're okay. Like, it's okay to yell and berate people, and it's cool. And then it's like, oh, but wait a minute, on the real level, it actually starts happening, and then it's not.
Yeah, I mean, like you turn on the TV in any single country you are in the world, and you see, the likes of Gordon Ramsay, who many a chef has modeled themselves on, whether you're man, woman, even if you're not necessarily a chef, you've seen this type of behavior and go, oh, well, it's publicized, so it must be all right. And then all of a sudden you actually forget, especially when you're in that environment and you are succumbing to high levels of stress, where your emotional intelligence gets fucked out the window anyway, because you just don't have time to think through a process in your head going, okay, here's my initial reaction. Actually, no, that's not the right way to behave. It's like everything is on fire and you've got to try and prioritize. And unfortunately, your emotional intelligence is the first thing that goes. But they've seen this and it's just,
it's almost inhuman. The amount of shit you need to deal with in a restaurant environment is inhuman. It's beyond 99% of people's capacity. Like you said, everything's on fire. Like you're trying to deal with like a brigade of chefs and like customers and servers. It's for a chef to deal with that much in any given moment is insanity. And like it's like, how do we show ourselves grace in that?
Well, I mean, it's the same. Like when you start to look at PTSD and you look at the relationship between the hippocampus and the amygdala, and you realize that the relationship between the two doesn't, it's broken through extreme high levels of stress. So the one area of your brain that is reactionary and the other area of your brain that actually is thought-based and looks back into the past and puts some degree of context to it. When stress levels get too high, that just gets fucked. It stops working. And you think,
and then you throw a 12-hour day on top of that.
Yeah. Really so I would just wonder out there, like how many people, and again, I would like to go back to the topic of like, burning the industry down, because I don't think there's going to be a phoenix that rises out the ashes of this one. I think the damage will already have been done if you just set fire to every last individual who's done something wrong. But I think that, ultimately, if we look at the kitchen environments, and we know that mental health issues are prevalent within hospitality environments, but specifically looking at things like PTSD, I wonder clinically how many people out there are just assume that that's part of their character and personality.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, if I can share a bit of a personal experience, and that just has to do with like my life story, but I mean, so I grew up in a pretty broken home, like lots of addiction, single mother, just poor, and when you're brought up in these environments, it's kind of hard to relate to a normal world from a space when you're brought up in a lot of anxiety and a lot of unsafety. So there's like, you're like you're saying, your amygdala, it's like I'm constantly scanning for danger. Like my life was fucking dialed for working in a kitchen because I could react insanely quickly. I was constantly scanning for danger. I was always jacked up. My nervous system was really on high alert. And when you get involved in these kitchens, it's like, I didn't really have like a strong community of people as a teenager. And like I was making connections with people through drinking and drugs and these unhealthy behaviors, so to speak. So, this is just like, I start young in this kind of challenging home. I get brought up. This kind of carries through to my teenage years. And then as I get put into a kitchen, I'm like, fucking, I am home. Like, I get this. I know how addiction works. I know how to relate to people like this. I am like, my nervous system is like level 10 anxiety. I can navigate 10,000 issues. I'm always trying to look out for danger because I'm scared of my parents' reaction of how they're going to beat me when I'm a kid. So it's like it's like my whole universe was like, here's the kitchen, and I felt immediately at home. So when we're and then that comes up to me being a chef at 25, 26, being a head chef at a restaurant, and then me not having any boundaries growing up. Of course I'll work longer. Sure, whatever. What do you need? Like I will do anything for you because I don't want to be cut off from you. So I start to do this, and then when I start to hire chefs, I start to look for the same qualities in the chefs. I start to look for the qualities of no boundaries. A chef is like, hey, I don't want to work more than 8 hours. It's like, what are you, a pussy? Like, come on, man. And I say that like that's not how I talk now, but I mean, I'm just saying like that's how I would talk, and I definitely don't think that's okay. But like that projection of like expecting people to perform to that level, and a lot of people that come to the industry, it's like, we don't really care where you come from as long as you're willing to put in the hours and work extremely hard. It's like you have a place here. And a lot of people that like, as soon as somebody says, hey, I only want to work 8-hour days, 9 times out of 10 in like a fine dining environment, you're out the door. So we kind of perpetuate this this like bringing in this I don't know, wounded chef, you know, this wounded person that just like and that saved my life without a question. Like that kept me off the streets, that kept my head clean. Yeah, I got into the drugs and everything, but I had a purpose, and that is beautiful in itself. But you know, our old patterns start. It's like when you're 25 and 26 and 27 and 28, that's cool. And then I'm 35 and I have kids and I'm still in that state. It's like I never grew up out of that. I never transitioned on. I'm still caught in this like 25-year-old mind of like, this is how things work. And then I put myself into this identity box of being a chef. And it's like I relate to the world from this 25-year-old chef space. And it's like at some point, it's not going to work. At some point, we need to kind of take that box off, or break the chains, or break the rings, or the fence, whatever you want to call it, and kind of move on from that belief that we once had. So like a question that I love for chefs is like, how do you define being labeled a chef? What does that mean to you? And how do you define success? Because he asked me that at 26, you know, a chef is first in, first last out, works 18 hours a day, you know, always stays to the last plate. And how do you define success is how many restaurants do I have? How much money do I make? What kind of car do I have? And like, you know, and then like at some point that was running my life until I was 35, 36, 37, 38. And then my wife was like, shit, like this is not good. And I'm like, yeah, this is not good. So I think it's like when we have these gems of chefs that come in, like I know a handful out of the hundreds and thousands of chefs I met over my career. I know a handful, and not many. Like I could count on one hand how many chefs are like in this industry with a solid foundation of a definition of a human and a caregiver and parent. And it's really challenging to find. And that's just an observation. That's nothing right or wrong with it. It's just like, man, there's just not that many people that like have a good family foundation and own restaurants.
What are their backgrounds? Because I have my own observations for people that I've met in this industry who I would say are model leaders. But from the 5 that you can mention on your hand, are they all hospitality background, or have they worked in other sectors before and have come into hospitality later on in life?
Yeah, you know, I think 5 is even a stretch, and I'm not joking. What like the ones that I am thinking of, he's a vet. He's been cooking for as long as I have. And I always have this part of me. It's like, how did he do that? Like, how is he such a like focused, grounded individual? So there's one there, and then another one. Yeah, they're lifers, and then there's a big chef here called Mark McEwen in Canada, and he's another one. Yeah, so it's like that's all I can really think of. But and I also want to state that this is like in the public eye. You know, these are like chefs that are in the kind of the media, and you see them doing things. I'm sure there's plenty of chefs out there that I don't know about that do, you know, great work for the families and industry as well. Just want to acknowledge.
Yeah, there are. I mean, certainly being part of this project means that I do get to go and meet like scores of people. I mean, I've trained 150 managers in mental health awareness in the last 4 weeks, face to face, and you do get to meet those people who just you go, you've got this. You're on the right tracks here.
Amazing.
But then you also meet those who are gone, this industry's fucked. I can't do another 80-hour week. It's broken. The only way that it's going to fix is if the government come in and change the rules, or, you know. And I'm like, well, the rules are already there. We're breaking them all already. You know, the hours and the way that you behave with people and the money and all this sort of stuff. That you're already breaking most of the laws in terms of duty of care to your team. I said, so government in any country is going to do fuck all to change any of this. It has to start, and it goes back to what we said at the beginning with the people on the ground, and that again requires energy. And you know, there are going to be people out there going, nah, it'll never change. And that's why I started this, because I had arguments with my mates all the time. They were like, the best thing you can do is get out, because it's never going to change. And yet here we are today. And there'll be the other people who go, yeah, I can see this. I can see the changes coming and I want to be part of this. And how do I do that? Well, do I need to go to therapy and look at my life choices? Do I need to look at how I build the rotors for my teams and how I manage and I lead people? What can I do to be part of this epic change? But I think, just going back to something you were saying earlier, Trevor, obviously you got to a certain stage in your life and you sort of got to that aha moment. And you mentioned it was partly driven down by your wife giving you an ultimatum to say, it's divorce or counselling, which is, quite vulgar, but in truth is probably a lot of people will resonate with that, especially with the divorce rates within hospitality. But what for you was your aha moment? When was it that you suddenly turned around and went, fuck, I've built up these businesses, I've got the accolades, and that's not where my health is and my happiness is?
I would say there's a couple, but there's one story. It's kind of a funny story. So I would definitely consider myself a psychedelic advocate. I definitely think it's very important in role in playing in mental health and kind of expanding our consciousness as a human race. So I went on a fairly heavy psilocybin trip, which is mushrooms, and it was very beautiful. Like it was an amazing experience. It was very, say, ancient. There's lots of conversations with elders and lots of spirit animals, and like just being in this really beautiful space. And I was talking to a friend, and this was in 2019, and I was already kind of like I don't know if I want to do this for good. I've owned my restaurant for like 8 years at that time. And I was kind of just like playing around. I'm like, I'm not sure. Like I was starting to take courses and getting trained in therapy modalities. And I was like, okay, well, I could, do this and just keep it as a side hustle. And then I was talking to a friend in 2021, and I was like, hey, can you just mock me up like a logo just for Trevor Bird? I'm thinking about changing directions. And she made me this logo, and it's a completely, you might have even seen it on our email exchanges. It's a completely abstract logo. And you'd look at it and be like, oh, sure, whatever. But when I saw it, I felt like this like shot of like emotions shoot through my body as soon as I looked at it, and I welled up, and I was like, holy shit, like this is the elder that was speaking to me in that journey. And I would say, like I said, I definitely partake in psychedelics, and like I've been on many trips, and for that, it was like the universe kind of just like pointing me in a direction. And I have plenty of other stories like that as well, but it's kind of like showing me that this is where I need to go. And when that happened, I was like, okay, I'm committed. Like I'm gonna start exiting everything. And I just closed up everything 7 days ago from this date. So
I've got the tingles when you talk about that, because I've never touched psychedelics, because I already know I'll have a bad trip on the basis that I've got it into my head that the second I touch any degree of psychedelics, even like I've looked at ayahuasca retreats and those sort of things as well, because I'm fully appreciative of it, having never experienced it myself. But I've stayed clear of them because I wouldn't be able to dig myself out of that hole. But one thing that you did say that resonated with me is that prompt, that universe pointing at you. And I get that a lot, like a lot. And it was only after a lot of soul searching for a couple of years that I started to listen less to what my brain was saying and more to what my gut was saying. And every so often you get this, oh, well, that makes sense. So fuck it, let's just run with it and see what happens. And then something else will happen, and you just follow these connections. It's like pulling at a thread, isn't it? You see it there dangling, and you just give it a little tug, and off you go. So for you, as a result of psilocybin, but ultimately you had that same prompt where you go, that's it. This is it. It's a sign. It's a direction I need to go in.
yeah, absolutely, man. And that I like the hero's journey of like, how I got brought into my restaurant is also a very beautiful story like that as well. And yeah, it's I truly believe that no matter what's happening in our lives, no matter how challenging a situation is, or no matter how shitty we think a situation is, it's the universe giving us what we need. It's like the universe is our medicine, and it's if we can pick up on those cues and we can pick up on those things, what's going on around us, it's really trying to get our backs, and it's really trying to point us in a direction, no matter what it is. And it's hard to hear if you're going through a tough time. It's like, cynical, being like, oh, I don't want to listen to that. It's bullshit, fucking woo woo, whatever. And I get that too. I mean, I have that skeptical part of me as well, but there's this, fantastical, like, awe part of me that thinks that we're so much more than what we create around us.
Well, yeah, we're living, breathing organisms. You look at Darwin, for crying out loud. He was traveling around the world seeing different animals that had been adapted to their environment on a physical and mental basis. And yet, just because we walk around and we drive cars and we, use induction hobs, that actually somehow we are not anything like any of the creatures that are being shaped by their environment and their surroundings and their culture. Like, we are. And we just, sometimes you need to listen to it. Yeah. It's like, conversations with friends who are experiencing depression because their relationship isn't great, or they're not fulfilled at work and they just can't figure out why. And you say, well, look at the environment that you're in. Look at what you're surrounded by. Like, you're fighting against something that doesn't feel natural or right to you. And as a result, you're not living a true path, if you like. You're going against the grain.
Yeah, that's awesome, Kris. Like what comes up for me there is I was just exploring that this weekend in the school that I'm in, and I wouldn't say I suffer from depression. Like, I get depressed sometimes, and when I do, it's because I'm doing something that I don't want to be doing. When I am depressed, it's because my soul is like, please don't do this, and yeah, there was a point where I fucking lived for the industry. Like, that's a huge portion of my life, for sure. And I went home after service and cried countless times, and it's like, yeah, I wish there was an easier way for me to engage with the industry. I mean, it's like I've had my time in there, but it's like I found within kitchens and working in the restaurant, it's like, there's a lot of times where you're forced into doing something that, like, it's that abusive parent, like, forcing it on you. Like, you have to perform, you have to be there for 18 hours that day. This is because there's too much shit to do. There's too many fires. There's too many issues going on. And that's when I was at my lowest, is like when I was forced to be doing things I don't want to do. So, depression is very serious. Absolutely. And it's also a fantastic fucking check-in. It's like, okay, like, what's going on here? It's a good place to stop and go internally. And, like, for me, the most effective things that I've done when I've been feeling like that is, like, be alone and just with your thoughts and just think like, what am I doing right now that I don't like?
Yeah. I wonder whether or not, like, I proper geek out on all things to do with mental health, and I've always done it since I was dropped out of school from smoking too much weed and studying psychology. I've always been fascinated with it, which is why I ended up in sales and, like, wholesale supply sales, because I loved the psychology of people's brains and how you can meander around their thought process in a rather non-creepy, non-manipulative way. But, like, I often think about depression and some of the signs of depression, things like the, sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, like the increased REM, because your brain's trying to file and segment away all of that information and data, like the rumination, the worry loop. And you think, why? I know your brain physically changes when you have depression or any mental health issue for that matter. Your brain shape actually changes. So it's not just all in your head like we were always led to believe. But I wonder why the symptoms are the way that they are and what use they can have, because people can remain depressed for lifetimes and not end out of that. So what benefit can they provide?
Yeah, man. Thanks, Kris. And a part of me got really excited there. And I say a part of me because, I come from internal family systems therapy, which is IFS. It's a modality. And the premise is we are all multi-personality human beings. We all suffer from multi-personality disorder. And that's not to pathologize it or make it wrong. But our internal world is made up of a whole whackload of parts, a whole whackload of voices, if you will. And so the easiest way to describe it is, we're doing this podcast right now, Kris, and today, like with everything going on for you, it's like a part of you is probably like, yeah, I need to fucking do this podcast with Trevor. And there's this other part of you that's like, yeah, but my kids are sick, my dog just got operated on. So you kind of have these two voices in your head, almost a polarity, creating this inner conflict. And now when these parts get into extreme roles because of wounding, because of something that happened, like say, as a kid, you get put in a situation, a bunch of kids laugh at you, and then you say, whoa, I'm never doing that again. So now you just developed like a sub-personality of a protector that's like not going to allow you to do that behavior again. And so then you push it away, you don't look at it for 20 years, but you have this unconscious pattern of you're never engaging with people in a certain way because you're scared of that humiliation. So when we actually start to turn towards these parts that are holding on to these extreme beliefs, like, I can't do that ever again, and you have to say, well, tell me more about that. Like, why can't you ever do that again? And we can actually feel and process that pain and the emotions from decades ago and actually make it okay without shaming it. We can actually start to become a balanced human being again, where these parts are actually accepted by us. And then we start to develop self-love, compassion. And as we relate to our inner world with self-love, compassion, and care, that's how we relate to the people around us. And we can start to bring that into the relationships around us. So it's like, when we suffer from depression, it's like, I'm gonna just say, argue, challenge it. It's like, you are not depressed. A part of you is depressed, and we need to find out. Not need to, but I hold some curiosity around that. Tell me why you're depressed. What's going on? What's going on for that part that it wants to kind of turn a blind eye to everything else and stay in bed all day? Like, what is it protecting you from? What is it trying to tell you? What information's there? And the whole agenda behind this, is not have an agenda, but don't make it wrong. And a question I ask all my clients all the time and in conversation is that okay? So it's like, I don't, because as soon as you say, I'm feeling really depressed. This is good. So if I was to ask you, Kris, are you feeling depressed? And you say, yeah, I'm feeling pretty fucking depressed. I'm like, okay, well, is that okay? You say, no, I hate it. Boom, polarity. You have a part of you that's really depressed, and then you have this part of you that fucking hates it. And then now you have an inner conflict creating all this discomfort because you're not okay having these emotions. You're not okay feeling this way. And so then we start to turn our attention to one of these parts, and we start to navigate our way through what information they're holding.
I absolutely love this. I wish I was more of a creative person to be able to draw you a picture right now to explain exactly what's going through my head. But that for me was a big aha moment when I was in my late 20s. So we're talking about, what am I now, 35. So we're talking 7-8 years ago, where I was having to self-regulate my own behaviors. And I was having to suppress my own wants and desires, not in any sort of weird fantastical way, but just my impulse to say a certain thing or to act or behave in a certain way that I felt was, acceptable. I felt that everyone else thought would be unacceptable. So you're always having to use all of this energy to self-regulate. And it wasn't until a complete and utter breakdown, like a complete and utter personality identity crisis, which, was characterized by depression as well, low mood and everything else that went with it. But then you sat in front of a therapist. For me, it was CBT. And she was just like, well, why do you feel like that? Why do you feel like you can't say no to someone? Why do you feel like you can't stand on your own 2 feet and all this sort of stuff? And then you start walking back through, and then you remember a specific event that happened when for me, it was when I was 17, clear as day. And I made a conscious decision, and I remember it like it happened 5 minutes ago. I made a conscious decision in my head during a conversation that actually I can't be who I want to be because it doesn't fit in with society norms. And I'm going to suppress that person. This is going to come back to bite me in the ass at some stage. I remember being intelligent enough to know that this was going to hurt, but I suppressed it, and I continued to suppress it as part of my personality until I was in my late 20s. And then the shit hit the fan because of those two polarized people. There was part of me inside going, oh, you shouldn't do that. you shouldn't do that. And then you end up in this absolute well until someone points out to you, but why? Who says you can't have that core value? Who says that you have to be agreeable all the time? You don't. It's a diverse world we live in. It's just,
man.
and then once you dig all that out and you become friends with your 17-year-old self again, and you put a middle finger up to everyone who ever fucking showed you up at that age in life, you suddenly go, do you know what?
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with who I am, and as a result, I feel whole again. And and just to, it's so vivid and clear that aha moment for me was my way out of that particular experience at that time.
Thanks for sharing that, man. That's awesome to hear your vulnerable story.
Wow, that's how this whole thing started. Me telling this story to a bunch of people I didn't know, and them going, "Yeah, I resonate with that. Yeah, that's why I drink a lot, or that's that's why I take drugs, or why I work in hospitality, because it helps keep my mind active and away from these thoughts."
Yeah, so just tell me if this gets a little too out of the more in the technical level, but a lot of drug use and alcohol use, porn addiction is from what we call in IFS firefighters. So you have managers, firefighters, and exiles. And your exiles hold on to the shame, the belief that I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. Really, really sad things. I hold it. My sadness is too much for everybody. I'm not allowed to express it because it's too much. And a lot of time these exiles are buried because they're not allowed to have a voice, and they're really vulnerable. And it's like really hard to be vulnerable with it, especially in the hospitality industry. If you start crying online, which I have done plenty of times throughout my 24 years in kitchens, or just like I said, like you stop cooking and you just go outside and cry because you're like, fuck, like, you have this really vulnerable part of you, and it can very easily be shamed in that moment of expression. So it's like, you start to cry online, your chef is like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, stop crying, get the fuck out of here. It's like, that's telling me that my sadness is not okay. That's telling me that it's like, oh, my sadness can't be expressed because that makes me a broken human. And like, to take that further back, when we're kids, like, that's even more of a kind of, personality shaping age where, when we express our emotions as kids and our caregivers, like, they're doing the best they can with the tools they have. But when we're told that, like, I get angry and then my dad gets angry back at me and starts yelling at me, okay, my anger is going to create disconnection. So I can never get angry again. And you're going to carry that with you your whole life until you start to actually look at it, just like you said, just like that story you shared with us. So when these emotions start to run us and we start to disown our humanity, emotions are a human thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with any emotion. But we start to judge them. Oh, you're crying, that must make him weak. Crying equals weakness. When we start to hold that judgment towards it, we start to really get like it starts to get really uncomfortable, because it's like, oh, I feel like crying, but I'm just going to stuff that down. And now your firefighter comes in because it doesn't want to feel that emotion. So it's like, fucking drown it in liquor. Not feeling it, go drink your face off so that we don't have to feel the sadness or this anger, because we are not allowed to feel it, whatever happens. And now, in the work that I do with a lot of people is like, okay, how do we befriend that firefighter? Because the firefighter doesn't want you to be an alcoholic. All it wants to do is try to help you not feel the sadness. And it's like, yeah, feeling that sadness is one of the hardest fucking things we could ever do as a human, especially sadness that we've been carrying for 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it is. But if we don't allow ourselves to feel those emotions and to actually make them okay, it's going to come spilling out of you in some other way. And it's just about trying to gain the understanding of how that's happening and why that's happening.
So do you reckon that's why there is such a high rate of drug and alcohol abuse within the hospitality industry, is people suppressing? I mean, we know it's a coping mechanism, but is it they're coping for the fact that the stress and the system is causing irreparable damage at that moment in time, so they have to use something, or we have to use something that suppresses that?
Yeah, like, again, like from my own experience, it's like my nervous system was always so heightened, like I would have so much adrenaline in my body. Um, it would just come out so intensely, and to feel, after work, it's like, okay, I need to come off of this adrenaline. I need to calm down a little bit. So instead of actually engaging with that part of me and sitting in meditation, like I've gained plenty of tools over the past decade to kind of engage with that part. But it's like, you tell a 23-year-old chef, like, go sit and do some breath work for an hour after work and be like, fuck you, I'm gonna go get wasted. And it's like, yeah, I get that. Like, I would do the same thing too at 23. But yeah, like when those big emotions come up, it's like, instead of trying to understand them and trying to like work with them, it's like, I'm just going to ignore this, not look at it, and bury it, because that's way easier and way more fun. And it is. I don't blame you. 100%, it's way more fun, because just looking at yourself and trying to pick yourself apart is not a walk in the park.
No, and it's certainly not as quick as getting high or getting smashed, because.
And it's really sorry, Kris. I just want to add one more thing. It's easy because you're in a community, and it's like our community kind of drives our behavior. So it's like everybody go and get drunk together, and there's, again, it's great because you come together as like camaraderie. You have connections, you create a community, which is also very needed in our culture. But it's like, what if that community was like, hey, let's go do a sound bath after work for an hour, or let's go do a yoga class for an hour after work, and that's a hard transition to make, because it's in your face, alcohol and drugs, and it's just like so much easier to do that than another
It's
option.
Also, 100% of that. It's also fucking difficult to try and get those different parties and trains of thought to change their behavioral processes and go, you might have a manager who goes, actually, I do yoga and it's fucking class, and we're going to do it as a team together at the end of the service rather than go and get blottoed, and I'd like you all to come. That's fine, but it's getting the entire, or at least 40% or 50% of the team to go, yeah, do you know what? I'm comfortable with trying something different, because I don't think that people are. I mean, millennials and Gen Zs are definitely, they're definitely leading the way with this sort of thing, because they're a lot more free thinking. They're a lot more acutely aware of their role as a human being rather than just as a slave to the system. But trying to get a load of 20-year veterans.
I get that. I'm saying this is 100%, man. It's like this is like perfect world.
Well, no,
but yeah, like,
I'm saying it because I'm asking you. Like, I mean, I'm training teams of people here to try and get them to implement these systems. I'm saying, like, Trevor, as a man who has now completely changed his life so that he can, to atone, if you like, for the Ramsey-esque days and to help the industry on a new light. Like, how do you start to implement cultural changes for people that haven't seen a cultural shift in this industry ever?
Ooh, Kris, that's good. And I'm gonna be totally honest with you. Like, I don't fucking know. Like, it's such, like, I look at that issue and I'm like, holy shit, this is such a big issue. But I mean, just to jam on what you were doing before, like, I think that's amazing that, training. I mean, it all starts at the top, right? When, like, within, like, I do a lot of like corporate training and a lot of like business coaching, and it's like, you start at the top, and if your manager is saying like, hey, like, let's do a yoga class, it's like, yeah, I guarantee it, and like within a couple of weeks, people are gonna be like, oh, that was actually nicer than waking up hungover the next day. And it kind of is, it's a snowball effect, and it's going to take decades to roll out, there's no question. But I mean, training in, like, it doesn't need to be an hour-long yoga class. Like, take baby steps into it. One of the things is for me, the most useful tool I have found in my own self-discovery and my own regulation is breath work. I mean, that is, like, hands down one of the best tools you can possibly do. And 10 minutes of breath work in the most intense situations can regulate your nervous system right back down to ground zero. Easier, better than any other fucking thing I've ever done. And you can even attest that with other people, other breathwork. If nobody's ever tried breathwork, just Google or YouTube Wim Hof, and do his 10-minute video. It is gold. And it's like, there's so much more depth to breathwork than that 10-minute video, but like it is the foundation of becoming human. I won't get into that too much because I can go on to that for a whole other hour, but just give it a shot, and it can be pretty visceral.
Mate, 100%. There's something I asked you in my training sessions. I look at the room and I say, right, when was the last time any of you took a deep breath? And all of a sudden you see everyone go, and you go, how's that feel?
Yeah.
And everyone's going, yeah, it feels pretty good. I was like, that's because it's the first time you've done it since you woke up. Like, you're shallow breathing.
Yeah. And that's why I believe our industry smokes so much, right? It's like, instead of going to smoke, just go back and take 10 deep breaths, or like 5 minutes worth of deep, like as you smoke, you're like, you're just taking deep breaths, whether there's smoke behind it or not. You're like, oh, it's like such a stress relief. It's like, it's not the smoke, it's the deep breaths. So instead of actually smoking a cigarette, just go back and take a 5-minute break of just taking deep breaths, and you're going to get the same effect. But people just associate it with smoking because it's easier to be doing something, because like as humans and men, and you know, definitely in females as well, it's like we relate to the world as thinkers, doers, and problem solvers. And this is like our first layer of the onion, so to speak. It's like, this is how we relate to the world, is from our thinking parts, our doing parts. We're always looking for problems to solve, and like, so great for the industry, right? Because it's a distractor from anything underneath that. It distracts us from what's really going on in our internal world, because if we're busy all the time, we don't actually have to look at ourselves. If we're busy all the time, we don't actually have to feel what's happening inside of us. But anyway,
I mean, I don't feel the need to move on. Like, if you want to go into deeper, the thing about this whole conversation, Trevor, is it's, you know, there's a lot of people talking out there about mental health, and I don't like getting clumped together with all the people who are getting on the bandwagon to talk about mental health, because that's not the thing that we're doing. And this whole project was started long before COVID, because we could see, or I could see, what was needed in order to try and make this industry sustainable and to stop taking lives. Because let's be fucking blunt, it's taking lives. And whether that's through suicide, or whether that's through, you know, divorce, or, you know, family breakups, whatever it might be, it's costing lives. And so, and the rare opportunity that I do get an opportunity to really go into depth about the different layers and to things that will be beneficial for people, I think it's nice to be able to hear it rather than just talk about, you know, and experience sharing is important. It's vitally important to smashing the stigma, but we need to start thinking about progressive ways forward, and we need to look at the reasons why and what's going to help carry us out of this.
Yeah, and I think it would be a good segue into the conversation about the diners, right, and expectations of diners, because I think that really drives our industry, because we you know, we are in hospitality and we take care of people for a living, so to speak. So, excuse me. So, diners' expectations are pretty insane. Like, they're very, very high, and I think that, you know, we're in a very ripe environment for potentially for that to shift a little bit, but like, you know, small independent restaurants, especially the ones where chefs are super passionate and they're making everything themselves. It's like, you know, I think it's important that this is a, you know, I'm just going to spit one of my ideas out there that I think would be transformational for the industry. You can take it with a grain of salt, but I mean, you know, the most successful business models and the most, a way to kind of mitigate everything that's going on, it's like, stop trying to do everything. Like, stop trying to be the restaurant for everybody, and like, do one thing, whether it's one tasting menu, or you do like, you know, like 4 pastas really well, and that's it. But like, trying to do these, you know, diners go and they're like, I want fish and chicken and duck and rabbit and blah, 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 blah. It's like, man, like the work that goes into preparing, you know, a 16-dish menu is insane, with different proteins and different starches and different vegetables and appetizers and main courses and whatever. So, you know, it's almost like that would take care of a lot of it. That, like, if we just had like restaurants that did, like, it was like a chicken breast restaurant, you know, because it's like, when you look at like a ramen shop, it just does ramen, you know, and it has some garnishes on top of it, and they do extremely well. and when you go to like a Momofuku, it's like steam buns and ramen, that's it, and it's world renowned, and it's like, why are we trying to offer more than we can bite off? It's almost like the industry did it to themselves, and I'm guilty of that. I like really fed into that. I gave my diners way too much, and it was like, of course I won all the awards, because it's like I was fucking giving everything away. Like I wasn't like creating value in what I was doing. I had like a fucking potato crusted rabbit, fucking double barrel rabbit loins on my menu, and it was like the amount of work that went in. I think that should have been an $80 dish, and I was selling it for like $23. And it's like, people are like, oh, it's so good. It's like, yeah, you paid $23 for that. The thing's like that thing is not $23. Like when you look at how much effort went into that thing, and that's the only thing I should have been selling, to be honest. But I added a ton of other shit on top of that, stressed a whole bunch of people out. Anyway, yeah, I think that if you just like focused, like very, very, like just dial it back into like what you do and do it well. Because when you look at like fast food joints, it's like, I don't know if you guys have like an In-N-Out burger or Five Guys and Fries. It's like they have a fucking industrial sized restaurant that just does burgers and fries. And if I had that much space in my restaurant, I would be doing way crazier shit than that was going on. So it's like, just try to just dial it into like a very, very small thing of what you do and do it really, really well. But then again, it's like, and diners need to.
Yeah, and that's a big topic of conversation. So there's one thing I'm working on now, which I want to blurt out, but if I do and someone picks it up and beats me to it, I'll be fucking pissed, because I still have an ego. My ego is my biggest critic. But there's something I'm working on, which is I've certainly never seen before, and my research doesn't exist, but it gives that diner an aha moment that, fuck, I didn't realize that's what was involved in this salad, or in this drink, or in that service. I did not realize that. And I want them to, I don't want to make it so that when people have this experience, when diners have this experience, they go, God, my poor server, my poor chef who's put that together. Like, we should break them out of this place and save them from this heinous thing. And there'll be people out there going, yeah, do you know what? People deserve to be broken out of this industry. No, I want to try and create an experience where people go, just that paradigm shift, that psilocybin trip where they go, fuck, I didn't realize that being a dick to my waitress or waiter because my food was 2 minutes late was having such a profound impact on them, and they were going to carry that home for the rest of their night, and then they were probably going to take that out on their partner and then carry it into work the next day. Or I didn't realize that, the rump steak that I'm ordering isn't going to cut like fillet or taste like, a silver side or, butcher's choice cut. It's not always going to be as black and white as you think it is from the server, and again, this is where the industry's got that curtain, that iron curtain, whereby your food and your drink and your service just magically appears. It's no impact for the customer. It's simple and it's easy. And if they book a table at 9 o'clock, and then they turn up at 7 for their table, we accommodate them because that's hospitality and that's what we do. But I think in the same way, that's like the reason why the behaviours and stuff are the way they are in the kitchen culture, because it's our den, it's our den of iniquity, it's our lion's cave, where what goes on behind the scenes stays behind the scenes and the customer's none the wiser. And I don't think that it's a case of saying, do you realise that this goes on? Because ultimately I don't think diners will give a monkeys. But what I want to do is give them a proper experience, a real life, heart quickening, stressful 2-minute experience of what it would be like in that environment and the impact that their words have, just so that diner walks away afterwards and goes, actually, I'm going to make a sustainable choice in where I eat now, not because of plastic use or sustainability, but because of how my servers have been treated or how the environment works and what accolades they've got with that.
Yeah, I love that. And this is something that I've personally decided to do since exiting the industry. Is I don't eat at restaurants anymore that overwork kitchen staff. Like I know every restaurant in my city, and I know which ones do. And yeah, I just don't agree with that culture anymore. And yeah, there's going to be some pushback on that. People are like, what the fuck? But it's like, that for me is making a sustainable choice and trying to is putting my dollars where I see restaurants really trying to mitigate that want to take care of their kitchen staff and that want to make a better culture. Because I think that, making, like, I'm guilty of it. I made my chefs work 18-hour days for a long time. I get that. And but it's not who I am anymore. And I do want to see a change in the industry. And it's like, it's almost, yeah, like it's inhumane what goes on sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, would you say the industry's changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years?
Oh yeah. I mean, just having conversations like this is a big deal, right? And just having, the awareness and when a chef does, just seeing the polarization of like, I can't believe this chef, slapped another female chef's ass or another male chef's ass or whatever it was that happened. Like just that conversation alone, it's like, yeah, shit's changing.
Energy is focused on, at this moment in time, getting hospitality to a stage where it's a sustainable career choice for all new and all existing members who work within it. Because fuck me, it employs 72 million people worldwide. In the UK, it was the third largest recruiter in the country before COVID, employing over 3.2 million people, which is significantly less now. I think we've lost about 800 to 900,000 people out of the industry over the last year. And that's now putting tons of additional pressure on the remaining parties who are within the industry, because they're now doing 110% of the business they were normally, because people are just spending money like there's no tomorrow. And also at the same time, there's less team members having to now cope with that demand. And we're just seeing people exit. Like, you just have to look at one of our adverts about the Burnt Chef Support Service. You just see hundreds, like thousands of comments of people like, well, today is my final day. I've had enough. I'm gone. And so I'm, I don't know, what is it the same over there?
Yeah. Like leading up to the exit of my restaurant, like we couldn't even stay open 7 days a week. We used to be breakfast, lunch, or like lunch, dinner, and then weekends brunch, dinner. And it's like we could only stay open 5 nights a week just because we couldn't get enough staff. And I could have stayed open 7, but I just was like, no, like I'm not working my guys that hard. Doesn't make sense.
It's not good business.
So yeah, it's a shit show. And I would not say our business is like crushing it. Our business is numbers are way down, way down. Like my restaurant was doing 2.1 million a year, and like last year we did 800,000. So,
Jesus. Yeah.
It's rough.
And so you're now dedicating your time to, what is it exactly that you do, Trevor? Because you've spoken about things like breath work and therapy and a few other bits and bobs. So what's your MO now for your professional career?
Yeah, leadership embodiment. So leadership coaching, leadership coaching, self-leadership coaching, executive entrepreneurship, how to help. Like I love working with the overwhelmed entrepreneur, because I know that world really well, and just how they can get their priorities, something that aligns with them a little bit better, kind of take them through the process of not living from a way that the world thinks they should be living, but living into a life that they want to create.
I get that.
And if you wanted to group that under like a therapist,
Therapist, I don't know the correct terminology. Life coach, does that fit into it? Yeah.
Life coaching, like it's somebody that's going to help you step into your own power. Someone's going to help you get to where you want to be.
Is this always from an executive point of view, or will this help individuals who, for example, Mr. KP or Mr. Mrs. Sommelier, who wants to, to find what their real calling in life is? Is the stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's like if you're somebody that like something's not working out, and you're like, what's happening? Like I know there's something more out there. Like I'm not quite living into the life that I want to create. That's where it helps. And it's, I actually don't work with too many people in the industry, I work a ton of one-on-one with entrepreneurs, and I call them like professionals, like people that are managers and kind of higher up the chain. And that it's like, hey, I have all the success, but I hate it. And I'm like, great, that's what we dive into.
Isn't it funny? It depends on what you define success as, then, doesn't it? It goes back to what you were saying earlier.
Yeah. And that's coming from them. They're like, hey, like I have the car, I have the house, I have the wife, I have the kids, and I'm miserable. It's like, yeah.
Have you read Daniel Pink's book Drive, or heard of extrinsic value, which a lot of people are deemed in society to be successful based on these materialistic things, but actually they don't provide you any degree of long-term sustainable feel-good factor. They're just brief moments in time and history, other than family, which if you invest your time correctly in family, they can actually make you feel amazing. But if they're just there as a trophy, you're just living you're living a lie to yourself ultimately.
Yeah, that's it. And that's kind of just getting, like, people don't recognize that, though. They come in because they're like, all they know is that they're overwhelmed, they're having a hard time with their anger, they're really sad, and they're like, I don't know what to do with all this stuff. And then it's like, okay, we help kind of do, like I said, it's like we come into these situations kind of blended, or we see the world as one of our parts, and we say, I am angry, I am sad. And the training is to kind of separate from that, and then kind of realize that you are not the sad part. You are not your sadness. You are not your anger. You are not your depression. There is anger. You are aware that there is depression, but you don't have to identify with that. And then when you can create that kind of stepping outside of it, and you're actually looking at it, your relationship to it can change.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. I am not a depressed person. I have experienced depression. And as a result, I'm very familiar with it. I'm very acutely aware that it's there, but that's my fucking superpower. And I'm going to rock that because I now know how to identify it early on and know how to be able to help other people, and have better awareness if people don't recognize it or aren't able to at this moment in time. You can help with that. It's like the best superpower you could ever have. It's amazing.
Yeah, and as you start to see these things inside of you, you can see it inside of other people, and you can help
massively
guide that.
So, I always flippantly said it would be interesting for me to do an experiment, like a video diary, from going to do, and I'm not active by any means. I have started swimming actually, which is great for breath work because you have to think about your breath. If you mess it up, it doesn't end well whilst you're swimming. But I always thought about doing like a video diary, or wondering if anyone done an experiment on how long it would take you to get mentally unwell, to experience burnout or anxiety.
To get mentally unwell?
Yeah, almost like a video daylog. Like today, I'm eating healthily, I'm going to the gym quite regularly, but I'm going to stop all that. I'm going to eat shit. I'm going to eat carbs. I'm not going to go outside. I'm not going to go into daylight. And I suspect, having gone from thriving to surviving in less than a week before, I suspect it wouldn't take long at all. But it's just.
Yeah. Well, I'd say life ebbs and flows, right? And some weeks are going to be awesome, even though like you do all this work on yourself and like you have a good life. Like struggles. I mean, life is fucking challenging. There's always challenges in our way. Life is hard. There's no question about it. It's just about how do we relate to those challenges? What do we make those challenges mean? Do they destroy us, or do we recognize it and then we use them as like information to guide us? And to get back into kind of the spiritual world of things, I always love the analogy that our emotions are the language of the soul. Our emotions it's the only way that our soul knows how to communicate with us. So when we can look at our emotions as like a signpost into where to go, you can change your relationship to your emotions and not have them destroy you, but help you through your life.
You're ticking all the right boxes, sir. I appreciate that you've come from a hospitality background, but you definitely, I don't know. I feel like that we've taken sort of similar journeys, and there's even recently, we go back to almost full circle about getting called out and burnt. We got called out recently because we didn't call out the people who had previously been the bullies in the industry, and I said that's not the position of the Burnt Chef Project. We're here to educate, we're here to support individuals, and eventually those people who were or still are will be the ones who stood outside in the cold. And we were the ones getting absolutely set on fire because of that very reason. And at first, the feelings of, anger, the feelings of fear, of everything else. I was absolutely fooled. It put me into a depression very, very quickly. But then you come out the other side of that and you start to look through the anger of the individuals and you start to look at the underlying messages and the underlying messages of your emotions and why you feel that way. And then you start to come to terms with it. And actually you start to find you find your way through that forest. You start parting and fighting your way through those thorns to provide something that's beneficial ultimately overall.
And good for you for not like giving into that, right? Because that's the polarity right there. You should be doing this and you need to be doing that, like that extreme behavior of like people projecting their shit out onto you, expecting you to do something with it. It's like, no, like that's not what this is about. This isn't about shaming other people for their poor behavior. This is about how do we make it better. And by calling people out and being like, what you're doing is bad and you're a terrible human being, like that's not going to create change. That's going to create defensiveness, shame, and further polarization, which is much as like going on with our governments right now. And kind of we're separate.
Yeah, definitely.
We're becoming very separate.
So,
absolutely, man. So if you make a difference in one person's life,
oh yeah,
that's all that matters. Like I can tell, like you're not doing it. Like you're not doing a bad thing, man. You're doing something amazing, and it's like, other people are going to have their stories, and it's like, okay, great. If you want to do something better, like go for it. But as well, Kris, I would just encourage, that you do. I don't know. From there, it sounds like you're very selfless. Like you're just like putting everything in there, and it's like I hope that you are taking care of yourself in that sense. And do you know what I mean? Like I hope you're getting yours. Like this
in
is
the
a
early days,
kind of effort, man.
In the early days, I wasn't doing well.
You're taking on a lot,
but it's now hit this sort of not a plateau because it's definitely the trajectory is still increasing rapidly, but it's hit it to the point where I feel like I'm not chasing myself anymore. I think that our voice is strong enough in the industry. I have much grander plans with where I want to go and the things that I want to achieve in this industry, but you have to let things bed in and you have to like focus on the priority things. And ultimately that does give me an opportunity where family members are sick or I need to take some time off, then I have to prioritize them and me over this. This isn't going to disappear and fizzle out one day because I'm not working 16 hours and replying to messages and setting up arrangements and spinning plates. It's just, and that's an ego thing. I think that once you start to get over that and realize that actually it's bigger than you now, it's probably going to do quite well even if I wasn't here. It gives you a bit of a break to go and focus on some self-love for a change.
Yeah, man.
If people wanted to find you, where could they find you, Trevor?
You can find me on Instagram at the human Trevor Bird. My website is just being finished up, so trevorbird.ca. And I think I also have .com, can't remember. But it's not live yet. It will be. And I have a breathwork community. And if you're curious what that is and you want to get grounded and you're feeling amped up, like just reach out to me on one of the socials. I'll add you to the breathwork community. It's a free platform. Yeah,
mate. Well, listen, thank you for today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope that we can speak again soon.
Yeah, thanks for your time. I know things are crazy for you, so I appreciate it. I always love these conversations.
No worries,
so,
you too, dude.
Have an awesome day, Kris. Night, I guess.
Yeah, night.
I'm just starting my day.
Speak to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Burnt Chef Journal. If you haven't yet checked out the Burnt Chef Project website, then please head over to www.theburnchefproject.com. You'll find a whole host of resources, free access to our training app, as well as free support services, blog posts, our merchandise store, and also our ambassadors who are there to support you when you need it. Thanks again for joining us this week, and I'll see you again soon.